The autumn rain drummed steadily against the windows of Riverside Elementary School in Washington, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the day's lessons. Agatha Thompson adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and glanced toward the corner of her classroom, where a large wooden perch stood empty. For 3 years, that perch had been home to Minerva, a magnificent great horned owl that had become the beloved mascot of her third-grade class. Agatha had rescued Minerva as an injured owlet back in 2012, nursing her back to health with the help of local wildlife rehabilitators. When it became clear that Minerva's wing injury would prevent her from surviving in the wild, the school district had granted special permission for the owl to become an educational ambassador. The children adored her, and Minerva had become an integral part of their science curriculum. "Mrs. Thompson, where's Minerva today?" asked 8-year-old Emma, her voice filled with concern as she noticed the empty perch. Agatha's heart sank as she remembered the events of the previous evening. She had been cleaning Minerva's enclosure in the school's small outdoor aviary when a sudden gust of wind had blown the door open. Before she could react, Minerva had spread her powerful wings and disappeared into the darkening sky. "Minerva had to go away for a while," Agatha said gently, not wanting to alarm the children. Sometimes animals need to explore and find their own path. But privately, Agatha was devastated. She had spent the entire night searching the wooded areas around the school with a flashlight, calling Minerva's name until her voice was hoarse. The local animal control officers had been notified, and she had posted flyers throughout the small community of Riverside, a quiet suburb nestled between the Cascade Mountains and Puget Sound. Will Harrison, the school's maintenance supervisor, knocked on the classroom door during lunch break. His weathered face showed genuine sympathy as he approached Agatha's desk. "Any word on Minerva?" he asked, his voice low so the few remaining students wouldn't overhear. Agatha shook her head, fighting back tears. "Nothing. I've called every wildlife rehabilitation center within 100 miles. I've contacted the Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's like she just vanished." Will had worked at Riverside Elementary for 15 years and had watched Agatha transform from a nervous first-year teacher into one of the most respected educators in the district. He had also grown fond of Minerva, often stopping by the classroom to check on the owl and help with her care. "You know, owls are incredibly intelligent," Will said, settling into one of the small student chairs. "Minerva knows this place. She knows you. If she's able, she'll find her way back. But what if she can't survive out there?" Agatha's voice cracked with emotion. "Her wing was badly damaged when I found her. The veterinarian said she'd never be able to hunt properly in the wild." The weeks that followed were difficult for everyone at Riverside Elementary. The children asked about Minerva daily, and Agatha found herself staring out the window during lessons, hoping to catch a glimpse of familiar brown and white feathers. She had contacted local news stations, and the story of the missing classroom owl had touched the hearts of people throughout the Pacific Northwest. As autumn turned to winter, the hope of Minerva's return began to fade. The first snow fell in early December, blanketing the evergreen forests that surrounded their small community. Agatha tried to maintain her usual enthusiasm for teaching, but her colleagues noticed the sadness that had settled over her like a heavy cloak. "Maybe it's time to consider getting another owl," suggested Principal Martinez during a staff meeting in January. "The children are still asking about Minerva, and it might help them process the loss." Agatha nodded reluctantly, though the thought of replacing Minerva felt like a betrayal. No other owl could take her place, but perhaps helping another injured bird would honor Minerva's memory. Winter gave way to spring, and still there was no sign of Minerva. Agatha had begun the process of applying for permits to house another educational owl when something unexpected happened. Mrs. Chen, who lived in a house backing up to the school property, called the main office on a rainy Tuesday morning in April. "I think I saw your missing owl," she told the secretary breathlessly. "There's a large owl sitting in the old oak tree behind my house. It's been there since dawn, just watching the school." Agatha's heart raced as she received the message. During her lunch break, she hurried to the back of the school property, Will close behind her. The ancient oak tree stood at the edge of the forest, its massive trunk scarred by decades of Pacific Northwest storms, and there, perched on a thick branch about 20 feet up, sat Minerva. The owl looked different somehow. Her feathers were wilder, more weathered, and there was a new wariness in her amber eyes. But it was definitely Minerva. Agatha would recognize those distinctive ear tufts and facial disc patterns anywhere. "Minerva," Agatha called softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "Sweet girl, you came back." The owl turned her head toward the sound, fixing Agatha with an intense stare. For a moment it seemed as though she might fly down, but instead she remained motionless on her perch. "She looks healthy," Will observed, studying the owl through a pair of binoculars he had retrieved from his office. "Maybe a little thinner, but her feathers look good. She must have found a way to survive out there." As the afternoon wore on, word spread throughout the school that Minerva had returned. Children pressed their faces against classroom windows, trying to catch a glimpse of their beloved owl. But Minerva remained in the tree, watching but not approaching. When the final bell rang, Agatha stood beneath the oak tree with a small group of students and teachers. She held Minerva's favorite treat, a thawed mouse, hoping to coax the owl down. But as the sun began to set behind the mountains, Minerva spread her wings and disappeared once again into the forest. The pattern continued for several days. Each morning, Minerva would appear in the oak tree, watching the school with an intensity that seemed almost urgent. She would remain there throughout the day, ignoring Agatha's attempts to coax her down, and then vanish at sunset. "It's like she's trying to tell us something," Agatha confided to Will as they stood in the school parking lot on Friday afternoon. "This isn't normal behavior for her. Before she disappeared, Minerva was so social, so comfortable with people. Now she seems almost afraid." Will nodded thoughtfully. He had been observing Minerva through his binoculars whenever his duties allowed, and he had noticed something troubling. "Have you seen what's attached to her leg?" Agatha squinted up at the tree where Minerva sat motionless. "What do you mean?" "There's something tied to her left leg. It looks like a small cylinder or tube of some kind." Agatha's blood ran cold. "Are you sure?" Will handed her the binoculars, and Agatha focused on Minerva's legs. Sure enough, there was a small, dark object secured to the owl's left leg with what appeared to be thin wire or string. "Oh my God," Agatha whispered. "Someone's been keeping her. Someone had her all this time." The implications hit her like a physical blow. Minerva hadn't been surviving in the wild. She had been captured, and now she had escaped and returned to the only safe place she knew, carrying evidence of her captivity. That evening, Agatha called the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and reported what they had observed. Officer Sarah Rodriguez arrived at the school the following morning with specialized equipment for capturing birds of prey. "We'll need to be very careful," Officer Rodriguez explained, as she set up a large net trap beneath the oak tree. "If someone has been keeping this owl illegally, they may have subjected her to stress or even abuse. She's going to be very wary of humans." The rescue attempt took place on Saturday morning. Agatha, Will, Officer Rodriguez, and a wildlife veterinarian named Dr. Kim gathered beneath the oak tree as the sun rose over the Cascade Mountains. Minerva was already in her usual position, watching them with those intense amber eyes. Using a combination of recorded owl calls and carefully placed bait, they managed to lure Minerva down from the tree. The moment she was safely secured in the transport carrier, Dr. Kim began examining her. "She's in remarkably good condition," Dr. Kim announced after a thorough examination. "A little underweight, but no signs of serious injury or abuse. However, this object on her leg is concerning." The small cylinder was made of metal and had been secured to Minerva's leg with thin copper wire that had begun to cut into her skin. Dr. Kim carefully removed it, while Agatha held Minerva gently but firmly. "It's some kind of message tube," Officer Rodriguez observed, examining the cylinder. "The kind used by pigeon racers, or sometimes by researchers to track bird movements." With trembling hands, Agatha unscrewed the cap of the tube. Inside was a tightly rolled piece of paper. She unrolled it carefully, and her face went pale as she read the contents. "What does it say?" Will asked, noticing her expression. Agatha's voice was barely a whisper. "It says, 'She knows where we buried them. The owl has seen everything. We had to let her go before someone noticed she was missing. Don't look for us.'" The group fell silent, the implications of the message sinking in. Officer Rodriguez immediately called for backup and contacted the county sheriff's department. What had started as a simple case of a missing classroom pet had suddenly become something much more sinister. "We need to treat this as potential evidence in a criminal investigation," Officer Rodriguez said, carefully placing the message and tube into evidence bags. "Mrs. Thompson, I need you to think carefully. In the months before Minerva disappeared, did you notice anyone unusual around the school? Anyone showing particular interest in the owl?" Agatha's mind raced back to the autumn of 2015. There had been the usual parade of visitors, substitute teachers, delivery drivers, parents volunteering for school events, but one memory stood out. "There was a man," she said slowly. "He came to the school several times in October, claiming to be a wildlife photographer. He said he was working on a project about educational animals in schools. He spent a lot of time photographing Minerva and asking questions about her routine." "Can you describe him?" Officer Rodriguez asked, pulling out a notepad. "Middle-aged, maybe 45 or 50. Average height, brown hair going grey at the temples. He drove an old blue pickup truck. He said his name was Robert something. I remember thinking it was odd that he never showed us any identification or credentials." Will's expression darkened. "I remember that guy. He gave me the creeps, always asking about the school's security, what time the building was locked up, whether anyone stayed late. I thought he was just being thorough for his photography project, but now..." Dr. Kim had been listening to the conversation while continuing to examine Minerva. "There's something else you should know," she said quietly. "This owl has been trained. Her behavior, the way she responds to certain sounds and movements, someone has been working with her extensively. Professional falconers sometimes use message tubes like this, but not typically attached with wire. This was meant to be permanent." The realization that Minerva had been used as an unwilling messenger in what appeared to be a criminal conspiracy made Agatha feel sick. Her beloved classroom pet had been turned into a tool by people who clearly had no regard for her well-being. "What happens now?" Agatha asked. "Now we investigate," Officer Rodriguez replied. "We'll need to search the areas where Minerva might have been kept, and we'll need to figure out what they buried and where. This message suggests that Minerva witnessed something significant, possibly a crime." As if understanding the gravity of the situation, Minerva let out a soft hoot from her carrier. The sound was different from her usual vocalizations, more urgent, almost pleading. "It's okay, girl," Agatha whispered, reaching through the carrier's bars to gently stroke Minerva's feathers. "You're safe now. You did the right thing coming home." But even as she spoke the comforting words, Agatha couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal was far from over. Somewhere out there, dangerous people were aware that their secret had been compromised, and Minerva, despite her return to safety, might still be in danger. The following Monday morning brought an unusual sight to Riverside Elementary School. 2 sheriff's department vehicles were parked in the main lot, and several officers in plain clothes were interviewing staff members. Principal Martinez had called an emergency faculty meeting to address the situation without alarming the students. "I know this is unprecedented," Principal Martinez said, addressing the gathered teachers and staff. "But we need to cooperate fully with law enforcement while maintaining as normal an environment as possible for our students." Detective James Walsh, a veteran investigator with the County Sheriff's Department, had taken charge of the case. He was a tall, serious man with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He had arrived at the school early that morning to interview Agatha in detail about the mysterious photographer who had shown such interest in Minerva. "Mrs. Thompson, I need you to think back to every interaction you had with this Robert character," Detective Walsh said, as they sat in the empty library. "Any detail, no matter how small, could be important." Agatha closed her eyes, trying to recall those autumn days in 2015. "He was very knowledgeable about owls," she said slowly. "He knew things about Minerva's species that most casual photographers wouldn't know. He asked about her hunting abilities, her vision, her hearing. At the time, I thought he was just being thorough. Did he ever ask about the surrounding area? The forests, hiking trails, anything like that?" "Yes, actually. He wanted to know about the best places to photograph wildlife in the area. I recommended several spots. The old logging road that runs behind the school, the creek that flows through Riverside Park, the abandoned quarry about 5 miles north of here." Detective Walsh made notes as she spoke. "The abandoned quarry, tell me more about that." "It's been closed since the 1980s. The company that owned it went bankrupt, and the county took it over. It's supposed to be fenced off, but kids sometimes go there to swim in the flooded sections. It's pretty remote. You have to hike in about a mile from the nearest road." Will, who had been listening from across the room, suddenly straightened. "Detective, I just remembered something. That photographer guy asked me about the quarry too. Specifically, he wanted to know if anyone ever went out there, if it was patrolled or monitored. I told him it was pretty much abandoned except for the occasional hiker or teenager." Detective Walsh's expression grew more serious. "We're going to need to search that quarry, If someone buried something out there and used Minerva to carry messages about it, that's our most likely location. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim had been working with Minerva at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, trying to understand the extent of her training and what she might have witnessed. The owl had been fitted with a small GPS tracker, and the data showed that she had been kept in a location approximately 12 miles northeast of the school, in the direction of the abandoned quarry. She's been conditioned to respond to specific whistle patterns, Dr. Kim explained to Detective Walsh during a phone call. Someone spent considerable time training her to carry objects and deliver them to specific locations. This wasn't amateur work. Whoever did this had experience with birds of prey. The search of the quarry began on Wednesday morning. Detective Walsh led a team that included search and rescue specialists, forensic experts, and cadaver dogs. The quarry was a sprawling site with multiple flooded pits and overgrown access roads. If something was buried there, finding it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Agatha had been asked to bring Minerva to the site, hoping that the owl might provide some indication of where she had been taken or what she had observed. Dr. Kim transported Minerva in a specialized carrier that would allow her to see her surroundings while remaining secure. The quarry was eerily quiet, except for the sound of wind through the abandoned equipment and the distant calls of the search teams. Agatha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool morning air as she looked around at the desolate landscape. "This place gives me the creeps," Will said, staying close to Agatha as they followed Detective Walsh along an overgrown path. Hard to believe someone was keeping Minerva out here. As they approached the largest of the flooded pits, Minerva suddenly became agitated. She began calling loudly, a harsh, urgent sound that echoed off the quarry walls. Dr. Kim stopped immediately. "She's reacting to something," Dr. Kim said, studying Minerva's behavior. "This is the same type of distress call she made when we first captured her. Something about this location is triggering a strong response." Detective Walsh signaled to the search team, and within minutes the area around the flooded pit was swarming with investigators. The cadaver dogs were brought in, and it didn't take long for them to indicate a positive hit near a pile of old concrete blocks about 50 yards from the water's edge. "We've got something," called out one of the forensic specialists. "Looks like disturbed earth, maybe 6 months to a year old." As the excavation began, Agatha found herself holding her breath. Part of her hoped they would find nothing, that this would all turn out to be some elaborate misunderstanding. But Minerva's continued agitation suggested otherwise. The first discovery came after about an hour of careful digging. It was a metal box, about the size of a shoebox, buried about 3 feet down. Detective Walsh carefully lifted it from the ground and set it on a tarp for examination. "It's locked," he said, studying the corroded padlock. "We'll need to get this back to the lab to open it safely." But the digging wasn't finished. As the team continued to excavate, they uncovered more disturbing evidence, pieces of clothing, personal items, and finally, what appeared to be human remains. "We need to expand the search area," Detective Walsh said grimly, "and we need to get the coroner out here immediately." Agatha felt sick as the full scope of what they were uncovering became clear. Minerva hadn't just been a messenger, she had been a witness to something terrible. The people who had taken her had been using the quarry as a burial ground, and somehow Minerva had seen enough to make them nervous. "Mrs. Thompson," Detective Walsh said, approaching her as the crime scene team took over the excavation, "I think it's best if you take Minerva back to the school now. We're going to be here for quite a while, and this is going to become a major crime scene." As they prepared to leave, Agatha looked back at the quarry with a mixture of horror and sadness. Her beloved classroom owl had been through something unimaginable, and yet she had found the courage to return home and lead them to the truth. "You're a brave girl, Minerva," she whispered to the owl as Dr. Kim loaded her carrier into the transport vehicle. "You did the right thing." But even as they drove away from the quarry, Agatha couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't over. Whoever had buried those remains was still out there, and they now knew that their secret had been exposed. The investigation that followed the discovery at the quarry would become one of the largest criminal cases in the county's history. The metal box contained detailed records of illegal activities, including names, dates, and locations. The human remains belonged to 2 missing persons who had disappeared in 2014 and 2015, a journalist who had been investigating illegal dumping in the area and a local environmental activist. Detective Walsh worked around the clock to piece together the evidence. The records in the metal box led to the arrest of a criminal organization that had been using the remote quarry not only as a burial ground, but also as a base for illegal waste disposal operations. The photographer who had shown interest in Minerva was identified as Robert Crane, a member of the organization who had been tasked with monitoring the school to ensure their activities remained undetected. They were using Minerva as a lookout, Detective Walsh explained to Agatha during a meeting at the school 2 weeks after the discovery. They had trained her to carry messages between different members of their group. When the journalists started getting too close to their operation, they panicked. After they killed him and the activist, they realized that Minerva had been present during at least one of the crimes. So they kept her to make sure she couldn't lead anyone back to the quarry, Agatha said, the pieces finally falling into place. Exactly, but they underestimated her intelligence and her bond with you. When the pressure of the investigation started mounting, they decided it was safer to release her than to risk being caught with a stolen school owl. They never expected her to come back with evidence. The arrests came swiftly once the investigation gained momentum. Robert Crane and 4 other members of the criminal organization were taken into custody. The evidence found at the quarry, combined with Minerva's message tube and the detailed records in the metal box, provided prosecutors with an airtight case. But for Agatha and the students at Riverside Elementary, the focus was on healing and moving forward. Minerva had been cleared by veterinarians and animal behaviorists to return to her role as the school's educational ambassador, though she would need time to readjust to her former life. She's been through trauma, Dr. Kim explained during a meeting with school officials. It may take weeks or even months for her to feel completely comfortable again. We'll need to be patient and let her set the pace for her recovery. The children were overjoyed to have Minerva back, though they had been told only that she had been found and was safe. The details of her involvement in the criminal case were kept confidential to protect both the investigation and the students' emotional well-being. Will had worked overtime to prepare a new, more secure enclosure for Minerva, complete with multiple locks and a state-of-the-art security system. "Nobody's taking our owl again," he said firmly, as he showed Agatha the improvements. The first day Minerva returned to the classroom was emotional for everyone involved. The owl seemed smaller somehow, more cautious, but there was a spark of recognition in her amber eyes when she saw Agatha and the familiar surroundings. "Welcome home, Minerva," Agatha said softly, offering the owl her favorite perch. "You're safe now, you're home." Over the following weeks, Minerva gradually returned to her old routines. She began participating in lessons again, allowing students to observe her hunting behaviors and learn about owl anatomy. But there was a new depth to her presence in the classroom, a gravity that seemed to acknowledge what she had experienced and overcome. The story of Minerva's ordeal and her role in solving a major criminal case attracted national attention. News crews from across the country came to Riverside Elementary to interview Agatha and learn about the remarkable owl who had helped bring killers to justice. But Agatha was careful to protect Minerva from too much attention, limiting interviews and ensuring that the owl's well-being remained the top priority. "She's not just a hero," Agatha told one reporter. "She's a survivor. And she's teaching all of us about courage, resilience, and the importance of coming home to the people who love you." The trial of Robert Crane and his associates took place the following spring. Agatha was called to testify about Minerva's disappearance and the discovery of the message tube. It was difficult to relive those months of uncertainty and fear, but she knew that her testimony was crucial to ensuring justice for the victims. "Mrs. Thompson," the prosecutor asked during her testimony, "in your opinion, what motivated Minerva to return to the school with that message?" Agatha looked across the courtroom at the defendants, then back at the jury. "Minerva is an intelligent creature who forms strong bonds with the people who care for her. I believe she understood that she had witnessed something terrible, and she knew that returning to us was the only way to ensure that the truth would come out. She trusted us to protect her and to do the right thing with the information she brought us." All 5 defendants were convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The families of the victims finally had closure, and the illegal dumping operation that had been poisoning the local environment was shut down permanently. As the school year drew to a close, Agatha reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. Minerva was thriving in her classroom once again, and the students had learned valuable lessons about justice, courage, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals. "You know," Will said one afternoon, as they watched Minerva demonstrate her silent flight for a group of fascinated third graders, "I think she's actually happier now than she was before, like she knows she did something important." Agatha nodded, watching as Minerva landed gracefully on her perch and fixed the children with her wise amber gaze. "She saved lives by coming home to us. She'll always be our hero." The final bell of the school year rang, and as the children gathered their belongings and said goodbye to Minerva for the summer, Agatha felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had all been through something extraordinary together, a journey that had tested their courage, their faith, and their commitment to doing what was right. Minerva hooted softly from her perch, and Agatha smiled. "See you tomorrow, girl. We'll have new students to teach and new adventures to share." As the sun set over the Cascade Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Agatha knew that their story would continue. Minerva had come home, justice had been served, and their little school community was stronger than ever. The owl who had once been lost had found her way back to where she belonged, carrying with her a message of hope, courage, and the power of never giving up. Thank you for watching this incredible true story of courage and justice. Minerva's journey reminds us that sometimes the most unexpected heroes emerge from the darkest circumstances. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more amazing true stories that we share with you every single day. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us what city you're watching from, and share your thoughts about Minerva's incredible journey. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you these powerful stories of resilience and hope. Until our next video, remember that truth and justice always find a way to prevail.